been a good week at Westwinds. This very special time of the year, the Lenten season. We have prayer times every day of the week. And this last few days, we started what we're calling our Lenten Listening and Learning Tour. And what we're doing is just a group of us. This has been prompted by the Justice Task Force, the Westwinds Justice Task Force. A group of us have made opportunities for anyone and everyone who wants to visit some places where resurrection is taking place. Some places in our land, Jackson County, to find out more about needs and what's happening. Thursday, we went to Compassionate Ministries of Jackson County and learned about food insecurity in our area and some amazing things happening throughout the county where resurrection is taking place, and also about the needs and ministries to adults with intellectual disabilities. And Friday night, late Friday night, we went to Isaiah's Hub, which is an amazing ministry. And that we didn't just sit down and let them tell us about the ministry. We got immersed in that ministry. So we heard about it, not from the director, but from, 125, 150 children and teenagers. And it was a great time. But again, what we want to see is what's God inviting us into. So we just want to see what are the needs around us and where's some resurrection taking place. This week, we'd love to invite everyone of you to join us at 7 p.m. On Thursday evening, Thursday, 7 p.m. We're going to visit Together We Can Make a Difference. It's a ministry that serves families and especially children in a whole variety of ways. We want to learn about some of the needs out there for families in our town, in our county. There are so many needs. You all know that we have people who have to choose between getting their prescription or getting groceries, and God calls us to our city. And so we're going to be doing that this week, and then another one the following week I'll tell you about later. But the times are up here also. The times are on the website. But this Thursday, 7 p.m., and you can get the address and everything by going on the website. And here we are on this, we're 2 weeks from Easter, as Josh said. And this last week was the week of rejoicing, not just for our church, but for Christians around the globe. This week of rejoicing is, as we've been saying, kind of an anticipation, kind of looking at what's ahead. Because what we're now encountering is that time where we're getting close to what we call the Passion of Christ. That's why this Sunday around the globe is called Passion Sunday. And I think the thing that sums up this Sunday is taken from one of the Gospels. It's in Luke 9:51, where we read that Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. Now, we've actually had some geographical education during Lent this year, haven't we? A couple weeks ago, Pastor Corey kind of showed the purposeness of which Jesus traveled. The reason I'm doing this, if you weren't here, is because there's a big board here, and Corey drew a huge map. And I think cartographer is what a map drawer is called. I think in the first service I called it cartologist, and I think maybe some people think that Corey's a cardiologist or something. I misspoke. But anyway, but it was the intentionality where Jesus was in Capernaum for a reason. He was in Bethsaida for a reason. And it wasn't just where he traveled, it was why he traveled. So when we get to this time that we call, okay. There we go. Not yet. Hello. Should I do my bird calls or anything? Yeah. Oh. You got it better than the first service. In the first service, it just blew up, But anyway. Well, I can take these off my ears. I hate this thing. Excuse me. So when Jesus was going to Jerusalem, it wasn't just a geographic thing. They weren't just visiting the city. This was a symbol that Jesus was going to the place where his final days would take place. Jesus was going to the place where he would be arrested, where he would be crucified, and again he would rise from the grave. So you can imagine the heaviness of this journey as they get closer and closer to Jerusalem. In fact, some of his disciples even tried to dissuade him from going. He had been very forthright with them. He had said, we're going to Jerusalem. I'm going to be handed over to people who are threatened by me. They're going to put me to death. And on the third day, I'll rise again. You can imagine hearing that for the first time. It would be so confusing. And what we usually do as human beings when we hear something that's so contrary to anything we could imagine, it just kind of goes by us and we can't really focus on it. But they sensed in Jesus a foreboding in going to Jerusalem. Some said, don't go. And he said, no, I'm going. He resolutely went there. Not only resolutely, but with great intention and great knowledge of what was going to happen. These disciples had followed him for about 3 years, and I always love those early stories of when Jesus called his first disciples, because they're just so simple. Jesus is walking along the Sea of Galilee, and he sees Simon, who would later be known as Peter. He sees Simon Peter and his brother Andrew, and he says, hey, follow me. And they did. He goes a little further down the coast, and he sees James and his brother John, and yells out, hey, follow me. And they did. They had no idea where they were going, did they? I mean, think about it. Here they were following this rabbi, and they didn't know where it was going to go. I wondered if they even thought they'd even go that far out of town, let alone where they would go spiritually and emotionally and just in life. But that one decision they made to follow Jesus, that one decision made thousands of decisions. And that's true for all of us, isn't it? I mean, think of major decisions we make in our lives. A young person decides to leave home and go off to college, and that one decision fosters all kinds of new decisions and colors all those decisions. A person chooses an occupation, chooses a trade, and that one decision resonates throughout the rest of their life and even their relationships, where they'll live. Some of you, at a point in your life, chose to have a child. That one decision, wow, you didn't see what was coming then, did you? Thousands of decisions. Well, these disciples, they made that decision to follow Jesus, and they saw things they never thought they'd see. They did things they never thought they'd do. They couldn't have even imagined those things, and now that journey has taken them all the way to Jerusalem. And as Jesus is going into the city, it's that night that was the day before their Sabbath. Their Sabbath began at sundown on Friday. It was that Thursday night. And Jesus sent them ahead and said, get a place and prepare for us to celebrate the Passover. Now, the Passover was that Jewish festival that was just central to their lives. It was the high point of the Jewish faith because it commemorated that time when God delivered them out of slavery in Egypt, out of oppressive bondage in Egypt that they'd been under for 400 years. And so this was that celebration. And Jesus wanted to gather with them and celebrate that feast that they'd done every year together, but this time they would do it actually in Jerusalem. Now, as they were preparing and as they were gathering, something was supposed to happen that didn't happen. See, in that culture, inside of a home or inside of a room where people would gather, there would be a basin of water on the floor, and the intent was that people could get some relief from the heat. So, it's like what we do nowadays. If you have a friend over your house in the middle of winter, you offer them something hot to drink, or if it's the middle of summer, you offer them something cold to drink. Well, in that day, in that culture, in the hot sands where most people didn't have shoes, and if they did have shoes, it was a little piece of leather on the bottom of their foot, what they wanted to do was cool their feet. So they would wash their feet when they came into a home, or they would be washed for them. Usually, if someone came into your home, the servants would wash the feet. Of course, most people didn't have servants, so it was usually the youngest person who would wash the feet. The disciples are there gathered around, and nobody's washing anybody's feet. And we get a little hint of something else that had happened that night. One of the gospel writers says that a dispute had been going on among the disciples as to which one of them was the greatest. I know, 2,000 years after the fact, that sounds so childish, like, really? Come on. And it's hard to imagine how they would have gotten there, but I wonder if it was kind of like the thing of, well, Jesus is coming, and one of them said, he and I are really close. Someone else said, he and I are really close. Yeah, I'll bet. And maybe they thought
Jesus depends on me more than you. I don't know what it was. Maybe they thought they were higher up in this new thing that Jesus was doing, but they were arguing about which one in the room was most important, which is pretty obvious why nobody's washing feet. I mean, if this guy who you know very well is saying he's better than you're not about to pick that basin up and wash his feet. It's not going to happen. And it didn't happen until Jesus came in. And is there all haughty and arrogant. They looked down, and Jesus had taken off his outer robe, wrapped a towel around his waist, picked up the basin, and was going around the room washing their feet. And I always picture that moment as, they're all puffed up and all this stuff going on inside of them. And I think it all just kind of drained out and through their feet. And there was arrogance floating all over the floor at that point, I think. I don't know. Jesus washed their feet and greatly humbled them. And then we pick up in John 13:12 his explanation of this. He said, "Do you understand what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so. That is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I have set an example that you should do as I have done for you. I tell you, servants aren't greater than their master, nor are those who are sent greater than the one who sent them. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." Think about this now. Jesus has spent 3 years walking with them and teaching them that this new kingdom, he called the kingdom of heaven, this new reign of God, R-E-I-G-N, this new reign of God that had come in Jesus of Nazareth was unlike the empires of this world. Unlike the empires of this world. He talked to them before about how those people lorded over each other, and they try to power over instead of stoop under. He's been telling them this for 3 years, and they get to the final point of the journey, and they're arguing about which one is the greatest. Because they, like you and me, are so human. Jesus is explaining something that he wants us to know. He's going to the cross, and they're going to go to the cross with him, at least get close to it. Only a few of the women will actually go to the cross. We use that term all the time in Christianity, the cross. That Lent is a journey to the cross and then through the cross. What does that mean? In the first century, the word cross was simply stood for an instrument of torture. Crucifixion was this heinous way of putting someone to death. And in that region especially, where it was so full of a large Jewish population, the ones who were trying to control the Jews, the Romans, their small contingent, they not only used force, but they had to use intimidation and fear. So crucifixion was where they would publicly, shamefully put someone to death in an unbelievable way in order to control the population, terrorize them, say, this is what will happen to you. I don't want to go into detail about it. You can read about it, but just suffice it to say, if any of us saw anyone crucified, whether we knew them or not, it would so deeply traumatize us. It would be so, that's what crucifixion was. It was a tool of torture. But it doesn't mean that to us anymore, does it? We don't see the cross on the top of a church or hanging around someone's neck and say, that's an instrument of torture. It means something else. It means something that Jesus did. What is it that he did? How do we explain that? We've been wrestling with this for 2 millennia now. What exactly does it mean that Jesus died for us? I remember when I was in seminary, I had to take a whole semester class called Theology of the Atonement. Atonement is kind of an overarching term to use to talk about Jesus' death and resurrection. And so we had all these different theories of atonement we had to learn and study and write papers on and all that kind of thing. And you know what I remember about that class? I remember the professor's accent. I know I should have been paying attention to something else, but he was this British guy, this brilliant British guy. And first day of class, I'm thinking, I don't know if I can get onto his accent. And then a couple days later I did, and I realized that there are a whole lot of Brits who talk very slowly. And it was wonderful. I didn't have to take notes. I just took a transcript of everything he said, and got a B out of the class. I was really happy about that. But we had all these theories of the atonement that we felt like if we were going to be theologians, we had to be able to explain all of this. And you know what? Jesus never presented any theory of the atonement. Jesus never described the ramifications of it to his disciples. He told them what he wanted them to do with it. What he wanted them to do was become servants, to wash feet, to show this new kingdom in a way that no kingdom on earth had ever come to be. That night he would say, "A new command I have for you. A new commandment I give you. Love one another." Now that wasn't a new commandment because that was in their scriptures. The new part was the next phrase. "A new commandment I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, you must love one another." That was the new part. I don't get to define love. If I did, I could really make it a breeze. I could make it a motive. I could make love something that has to be reciprocated, or I won't love if I'm not loved in return. I could do all that. But Jesus said, no. I want you to love one another as I have loved you. And what he said, I have loved you by serving you, by washing your feet, and I'm going to love you by going to the cross. That's what I want you to do with the cross. Now, that's hard for me to hear because, I just don't love like Jesus does. Not yet. I've been working on it for a long time, and I'm not there. In fact, I doubt if anybody in this room would say, well, I got it wired, Pastor. I love just like Jesus does. No, we all feel like that's unimaginable, maybe impossible, because we see this as this bar that Jesus is setting. But remember, what did Jesus say when he called his disciples? He didn't say, pray this prayer. He didn't say, do this thing, accomplish this. He said, walk with me. Follow me. And as they walked, they learned, and they grew, and they saw love in action, and they began to emulate some of that love. And sometimes they did it good, and sometimes they really fouled up, and sometimes they wouldn't even wash each other's feet because they'd lost the narrative. But it was a journey, and for you and I, it's a journey. That same night was a real turning point in one of their journeys. Simon Peter, he gets pulled over aside by Jesus, and Jesus says something very strange to him. I've read this verse lots of times over the years and not really grasped it. He said, Simon, Simon, look, Satan intends to sift you like wheat. I never knew exactly what that meant. But I think we understand it when we understand the context of it. We remind you sometimes that in the English language, when we say you, it could be you singular or it could be you plural. It could be you, or it could be you. And, man, I should have taken that whole around. And in the original language of the New Testament, the Greek language, there are two separate words. So you can always tell when Jesus is saying you individually or Jesus is saying you collectively. And that carries into here. So here's what he says. Simon, Simon, Satan intends to sift you all like wheat. So that's the plural. He's talking about the men in the room. He's saying Satan intends to sift you guys out, to separate you, to rattle you, to confuse you, to destroy you. Satan intends to sift you all like wheat. Then he goes on to the singular. He says, however, Simon, I have prayed for you, that your faith won't fail. And when you have returned, strengthen your brothers and sisters. Which is kind of a curious thing for Simon. When I've returned, he basically says, I'm not going anywhere. He responds, Lord, I'm ready to go with you both to prison and to death. I will go anywhere that you want me to go. And then Jesus replied, I tell you, Peter, the rooster won't crow today before you have denied 3 times that you even know me. They're getting now toward the middle of the night and all that's going on. And he says, Peter, before sunrise, 3 times you're going to say, I don't know anything. I don't even know who that guy is. You're going to totally disown me. It's going to be the biggest catastrophe of Peter's life. I know I've heard this story since I was a kid. I grew up in church, and it was always, Peter made this mistake, but Jesus forgave him, and everything was okay. But I doubt that it was all okay with Peter. I just imagine that the rest of his life, every time he thought about that night, and knot came in his stomach of, oh, Lord, I let him down. I ran away. I was a coward. I'm sure that even though he was forgiven by God, he had a long journey to forgive himself. But think about this. Think about what's just happened here. Jesus has said, I'm praying for you, and I want you to take care of your brothers and sisters when you come back, when you get your mind cleared, when you get your head screwed on straight again after the fall, because you're going to take a big fall, dude. You're gonna fail more than you ever thought you could. But even when Jesus is saying you're going to fail, he's saying, take care of these guys because you're still my person. You're still the one I have plans for. And I think that what he said to Simon Peter that day is what he says to every one of us. I think when we take that decision to follow him, he knows we're going to make thousands and thousands of decisions, but we're going to make thousands and thousands of mistakes. But he still says to every one of us, you're my woman. You're my man. No matter what happens, you'll get through it. I still have called you. I still have a plan for you. Jesus is not surprised by our failures. Sometimes we surprise ourselves. We're still his. Because it's not about how well we perform. It's about how deeply, deeply he loves. So we make that decision at some point in our lives. Now, I know for some of us, we know exactly when we made that decision. We know when we decided to follow Jesus. Others of us, you look back and say, I don't remember exactly when it happened, but I know it happened. It's like sometimes there's a light switch that you flip on, and sometimes there's a dimmer switch that just gets brighter and brighter. We're talking about it this week, this concept, and Pastor Josh said, he says, kind of like when Christy and I were dating, there wasn't a day when I said she's my girlfriend. There was just this day we realized that we were together and probably for life. And so some of you kind of came to Christ in that manner. You don't know exactly when it happened, but you're still following. And some of you know when you made that decision, and you also know that you made many more decisions. I remember some of my later decisions when I was following Jesus, but man, I just didn't believe in myself anymore. I didn't think God could ever use me for anything, but I made the decision to take another step. How many, just show of hands, how many in this room actually remember the day that you made a decision to follow Jesus? Anybody? Anybody? I see that. Jeff, what was the day? Easter 1979. How cool is that? How cool is that? Some of you remember exactly how old you were. How many remember exactly how old you were when that happened? When that happened? Get someone else. I don't know your name. The gentleman on your right, my left. How old were you? 11? How about you? 18. Isn't that cool? That's so cool. Some of you remember where you were. Anybody remember exactly where you were when you made that decision? Christina. Summer camp. Wow. Whoever says summer camps aren't worthwhile, right? Changed your whole life, right? That one decision makes all those decisions. Some of you probably don't think of it as a day or a time or even your age, but it was a season you were going through. Maybe it was a season where you were expecting a child and you thought, oh no, what am I going to do with this? Maybe it was a hard season where you went through the loss of a loved one or deep, dark days of depression. Maybe it was a season where you were just so confused about your future, you began to ask, does it matter? Does God even care what my future is? Maybe it was a season like that, but somehow in that season where you could have decided to just give up and not give a rip about anything in life, you decided to follow, or at least somehow the journey began. You see, that's what Jesus tells us about what the crucifixion means. It's what he wants us to do, to follow. Good or bad, blunders, mistakes, victories, all of those. And then one night, he got together with them, that very night we've been talking about, and he explained exactly what it was. But it was so cryptic that we've still been trying to figure it out ever since. He said, basically, I'm going to the cross. And at that Passover celebration, they had all kinds of different foods, meaning different things. He grabbed the bread and he broke it and he said, this is my body, which is going to be broken for you. He said, I want you to eat this and remember what's happening. Then he took the cup of wine, which was part of the Passover celebration, and he said, "This is my blood of the new covenant, the new promise. That is that you will interact with God in a whole new way because of the coming of Jesus." He says, "All of you drink this," and they passed it around. Now, at that moment, I'm sure they didn't get any of that. And I've been working on this for 40 years, and I still don't get it all. But it was a gift from God, and he said, this is what the crucifixion means. We're going to go to the Lord's table at this time. I'll ask the musicians and our communion hosts to come forward and take their places. This simple sacrament, so simple, is kind of the center point of who we are. You know, just like Passover was the center point of the Exodus, the deliverance, the center point of our deliverance and our relationship and our entry into this new kingdom is when Jesus repurposed. He took that bread and made a difference. So as we celebrate the sacrament of communion, a couple of things I want to tell you. First of all, what we'll do, we've got a table here, a table there, and a table in the center in the back. And the way we are going to do it is you'll come and take a piece of bread and just dip it in the cup and then take it before you return to your seat. Now, we have what we call open communion. That means anyone and everyone is welcome to take the sacrament. In fact, we usually say wide open communion. Wide open. It doesn't matter where you're at in your spiritual journey. You may still just be thinking about that decision. That's okay. This is a gift from God to you, and we would never withhold it from you. Now, if you don't feel comfortable taking the sacrament, that's all right. For whatever reason, we're going to sing a song, and you can come up during the song. And if you don't choose to come up, no one judges you or anything like that. But we want you to know everyone is welcome. And we use gluten-free bread, and because we don't want anybody excluded. And our wine is really alcohol-free. It's grape juice. We do it that way because we want nobody to be excluded because they can't take the elements. And after I pray, you can just, during the song, however it works for you, come forward. Or again, there's a table in the back. Take the bread, dip it, and eat the bread. And remember that on that night, their journey had taken them all this way. And he was saying, I'm going to be with you the rest of the way. So, Lord, thank you for this gift that you give to us that is beyond comprehension, and yet we understand in our spirits. It is about love. It is about one who loves so much. He served us and washed our feet and went to the cross for us. And so in our simple way, our time at the table of the Lord this morning is an expression of thanksgiving. In your name we pray. Amen. All are welcome to the table.